And some of our remote viewers have concluded that yes, it's going to happen this time. That we and it will be on the same side of the sun at the same time. And if the remote viewer, and they're getting their information from ETs, from sources within the US government that tell me that yes, they are deeply concerned about it, and they're worried sick about it, and they don't know what to do about it. What could the government or anyone else tell you? What could they say to you? Would they tell you that grab your hat, dig a hole, hang on? He says, oh, it seems to be a rather nice planet, and we know about it, and all we need to do is name it. And then bless his heart, you know, he had never had a heart problem, but within a year he was dead with a heart attack. Incredible race of humans, does have a future, and it is in the stars. Mm-hmm. And we are going out there to reclaim our rightful place. It's kind of amusing considering that the last time we met, I told you it was to be my last interview. And here I am again, and you know, how can I explain that?
We have gotten the most incredible response to your interview. I have to say, it's actually been the most popular of all of our interviews.
Well,
and I think there's a reason for that.
Oh, thank you.
I think that in many ways you put yourself on the line, and you actually embody the curiosity that was like rampant in all of us. And you did it at a time when, and in the military no less, and you broke rules, and you kind of stuck it out, and you're just, I don't know, a one-man disclosure project as far as I'm concerned.
Well, thank you, Carrie. That's very kind of you to say that. But let me explain something. I was a normal human being for a big portion of my life. You know, I was a career military and no-nonsense kind. I wore a crew cut. When I learned what I learned in 1963, 64, 65, it changed my life. It changed my way of thinking, and I became obsessed with what I had learned. And over the years, I've learned so much more. And as I may have mentioned to you earlier, I learned a little bit. I wanted more. You know, talk about an addiction. When you start learning some things about a subject that is so profound, the more I learned, the more I wanted to know, and the more I wanted to know, the more I learned, and the more I learned, the more obsessed I became. And you talk about losing a paradigm. My old paradigm literally crumbled around my knees. You know, the world that I thought I lived in, I learned was not the world that I lived in. And the reality that I looked around and thought I saw was not the reality that exists. Mm-hmm. That much of what we see is an illusion. It's a result of our own illusions. We humans sometimes, rather than face reality, we create a little world of our own. You know, we get up and go to work, we raise the kids, we buy a house, buy a car, take a vacation, go on about our lives, try to save money, put a little in the bank for the kids' college, and live a normal life. And then I learned that there's no such thing as a normal life. That the world that exists is not at all what we think it is. And the more I learned, as I said, my old paradigm crashed around my knees, and I'm sitting here in front of you as a human wreck, you might say, you know, as to what I used to be. Because I lived in a world that was kind of cut and dried. Oh, you know, do this, do that, you pay your bills. It's not that way at all.
Well, let's cut to the chase here, because you have come forward, actually you contacted us, I'm going to say, and said, you've got something new to say. You've got something new to tell the people. And I know you're going to be speaking at the Bay Area conference, and this is amazing. And let's find out, what is it that's new? What is it you're willing to...
You want me to divulge to you my great revelations, which I'm planning to speak about at the conference, right?
Absolutely. And you know, this video will not be edited and out there before the conference, so you don't have to worry that we're not going to ruin it for the viewers of the conference.
Well, there's lots of little tidbits that are kind of interesting to me. I hope they'll be interesting to the people at San Jose. It's been my experience that the people who attend those conferences are pretty wide open, open-minded. Mm-hmm. As I jokingly used to say when I speak there, it's like preaching to the choir, you know, mm-hmm. because they're a different group of people. Well, I'll give you a tiny tidbit, which I found interesting. As you perhaps have understood, I have been a member of what we used to jokingly call the Old Boys Network. I've been a member of it for over 40 years. And when we created this group, it was made up of military types primarily, all ranks, all services. And we even had a couple of cosmonauts who were connected with this, mm-hmm. who were providing information. Well, over the years, the old boys have shared information with each other because we've had a variety of assignments and jobs in the military. We had a couple of admirals, we had a general, had 2 cosmonauts, we have innumerable colonels and command sergeant majors and people from all walks everywhere who provided information we used to share with each other. And some of us have been in very sensitive positions and had access to very highly classified material, and we've been very open about sharing that with others, which kind of kept us going for a long, long time. There aren't a hell of a lot of us left. The last time originally there was roughly about 150 members of this group. Mm-hmm. And today there's probably not more than a dozen left. We lost a good one, you know. Graham Bethune died here about a year ago. And Graham was a retired Navy commander who was a dear man, mm-hmm. who had some very sensitive information he used to share with others. But as I point out, we shared among ourselves. And then a few of us who came out blatantly, purposely, and started sharing what we had learned with the public. Frankly, I never thought I was going to get away with it. I thought they were going to stamp on me and, you know, eliminate me or whatever. There was even rumors, for God's sake, that they were going to call me back to active duty and court-martial me. You know, well, I'm going to be 80 at my next birthday, so I don't think they want to call me back to active duty. You know, I could have an accident, but I think why I'm getting away with what I'm getting away with, so to speak, where I'm releasing bits and pieces of this cover-up, is that there's somebody back there somewhere who wants me to do what I'm doing, or I would not have been able to do this. But let me give you a tiny tidbit of bits and pieces that come from the Old Boys Network. There is an organization called the National Reconnaissance Office. You've probably heard of them.
Absolutely.
A very super secret group. I mean, super secret group among super secret groups. God, we've got so damn many groups now. As I used to jokingly say, when poor old Ike left office, he tried to tell us about the military-industrial complex. Well, it's a triad now. It's not just the military and industry. Mm-hmm. It's the national security agencies as well. Mm-hmm. So if he could see it today, he'd be shocked even more. Of course, I'm sure he's alive and well somewhere, so he's probably looking down, chuckling. But we are a triad now. The super secret agencies with the military and the industry. It's all like this. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, there are people who I think want this out. We've known for years that among the in crowd, whoever the hell they are, and no one really has ever been able to put our finger on it. We've been able to grab a couple of them from the old Magi group, the wise men they called themselves. The Magi, you've heard them referred to as Majestic 12. Well, they're a lot more than 12 now. Anyhow, I'm getting away with sharing bits and pieces and tidbits which intrigue me because I think somebody wants some of this out. But the story I was going to share with you is that in the National Reconnaissance Office, about, I guess, 4 or 5 years now, they had for a number of years a series of satellites called the Keyhole system. You've heard of it?
Yes.
Keyhole. Oh, it was super secret and probably the very best satellite system in the world. Mm-hmm. Well, they probably made it even better now. They could supposedly read a postage stamp from space. Well, there were some intriguing questions being raised by a number of people about what was known as the Ararat anomaly. Are you familiar with the Ararat anomaly?
Mount Ararat, Noah's Ark.
Okay.
And so the guys in the NRO took their keyhole system and focused on the Ararat anomaly, which is, you know, a puzzle. Well, when the word got out, when the pictures finally were downloaded, and they computerized and enhanced them and cleaned them up, and they pushed them on the wall, or they broadcast them on the wall there at NRO. The remarks went something like this, and these are actual quotes. Jesus Christ, it's a goddamn boat. Christ, it's a big boat. Okay, one would say, why would something like that be so highly classified that it is way above top secret? Why would the discovery of a boat on Mount Ararat be classified so high, far above, you know, anything? Anyhow, the story comes out. The reason they classified it is because after they discovered that it was a goddamn boat, a big goddamn boat, they inserted a team of SEALs on the site. Now, that's a term that the military uses to put a bunch of guys on a scene.
Right.
Apparently they dropped them by aircraft, they parachuted down, a dozen of them or so. They inserted them onto the scene, and these guys spent several days in this goddamn boat. And then they extracted them by helicopters. And when they extracted them, the guys brought with them some anomalous artifacts, which have never been described or named. But those anomalous artifacts is what led to this whole thing being classified not only top secret, but way the hell above. And that's a little bit of information that's come out via the network of the old
So are you
boys.
saying this is Noah's Ark?
No one knows what it is. It was originally the Ararat anomaly. But then they discovered that it was a gigantic boat, apparently.
But a boat built by humans.
Well, it appears to be. Mm-hmm. It's essentially, from what they gathered, wood. Mm-hmm. But it's a work of genius, apparently. It was intricately put together. And it's really...
And it survived all these years.
Well, apparently. The question, how many years, you know? When was the flood? The last rumor I had was 12,000 years ago. 10,500 BC.
When are they saying? I mean, I'm sure you have a theory.
Well, the religious implications of it, you see. You know, every ancient culture on the planet has a similar tradition about a flood. And I'm sure there were many Noahs, so to speak, wherever. But the idea that this particular thing is so theologically sensitive that some yo-yo back there at NRO decided to classify it, and then they sent the SEALs in, and the SEALs brought back artifacts. Well, there you are, you see. What could they have possibly found in this big wreck that is so sensitive? question arises, I don't know the answer to that. Hopefully, if the old boy still stays alive a few years, we might find out. I find that interesting, and I share it with people because it gives you an insight into that bunch of nitwits back there that classify everything.
Bill, go ahead with your question about Mount Ararat, and then we're going to move on from there.
I think it was Charles Berlitz who wrote a book, now this is purely from memory, which was called The Great Ship of Noah. And he published a bunch of photographs. These photographs are on the internet, of something that looks like a ship on Ararat. And there are two versions of this from what I've heard. One is fairly low down, and which is an enormous thing that looks like a whole lot of ship's timbers. And there are persistent reports of another object that's much higher up, way above the snow line, quite close to the summit. And I wondered if you could say which of these, if either, has been picked up by the keyhole satellites and analysed, and when the seals were inserted, did they carbon date the wood?
Well, I'm sure they must have, but I haven't got any information on that. My guess is, Bill, that the seals were inserted on the one on toward the top, up above the snow line. That's the indication that I got, that that was the one that they went in, they landed, they dropped, they parachuted in. Spent a number of days up there, apparently. But what they brought back in the terms of anomalous artifacts is the thing that intrigued me. Why would they classify it so far above top secret? But that bunch of nitwits back there, and I've known some of them over the years. I've worked with some of them. And I think they are a bunch of damn nitwits. You know, there's no damn reason why they've classified so much.
Mm-hmm. What year was this when the seals were sent in?
About 5 years ago, from what I can gather.
Really?
Yeah.
That's bizarre.
Well, the keyhole program was really big in the late 90s. Now, I'm sure they've got satellite programs that are even better now. We've got civilian programs that are so damn good that the Department of Defense will often go to the civilian contractors and buy photographs taken by civilian satellites that are outstanding. So it leads you to suspect maybe how much better could be some of our DoD satellites.
Right.
You know, they have classified Lake Vostok. They took it away from JPL, who was monitoring it, and, you know, with satellites and all. You're familiar with Lake Vostok in Antarctica?
No. Oh, no.
Oh, God, that's a sensitive story in itself. Under the ice in Antarctica, there is a freshwater lake deep, deep down under the ice that's 100 miles long and about 50 miles wide. Fresh water. The temperature in the damn lake is about 65 degrees, which is pleasant swimming, you might say. But at the end of Lake Vostok is what's known as a gigantic mass con, a mass concentration of metal, very similar to the mass cons they discovered on the moon. Gigantic circular-shaped metallic objects deep under the ice at the end of Lake Vostok. Highly classified. JPL had it. National Security Agency took it away from JPL. It's one of the most sensitive things in the world now as to what is the anomaly at the end of the lake, the mass concentration that is so easily picked up by satellites. Another top secret, you know? Mm-hmm. The common folk, you're not supposed to know that.
Right.
Why? Well, you can't handle it, you see. The implications of it are just too vast.
Well, tell me this. Do the Chinese know it?
Oh, I'm sure they do. As you may know, the Chinese now have gone into space in a big way. It never gets into the newspaper, but the last I heard, the Chinese have a satellite orbiting the moon, taking lots of pictures. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm hoping that the Chinese publish a lot of those pictures, because our own NASA people took many, many pictures. The Army took thousands of pictures under the Clementine Project. Are you familiar with Clementine?
I've heard of it.
It was not a NASA program, it was an Army program, Department of Defense. They took thousands of pictures. They've only released a dozen or so. They took pictures all around the moon, backside, bottom, top, everywhere.
Well, are you in touch with Richard Hoagland?
I know Richard. He's a good friend.
Okay. So you know some of his recent research?
Ah, well, I read his recent book, which is dynamite.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So
you know about the secret space program?
Oh, yeah.
And you know about the von Braun and the Nazis and what's been carried over to the U.S.
Oh, honey, it's
political
bigger
system?
than that.
Okay. Well,
much bigger.
But when I raised up Richard Hoagland's information and the stuff that he's bringing forward about von Braun, the Nazis, you know, paperclip, and you're saying it's much beyond that. So
It
where
is.
are we going with
Well,
that?
our original space program was all the product of the Nazi Party. Without von Braun and his crew and the paperclip program, I don't think we would have gotten to the moon when we did. We certainly wouldn't have beaten the Russians. Of course, the Russians grabbed their crowd. They also went into Germany and grabbed a bunch of scientists. And then the Russians have a tremendous scientific program of their own. You know, they didn't need Nazi scientists. They would have eventually done it on their own anyhow. But one of the biggest secrets of all is the secret space program, the fact that NASA is, it's like Blue Book used to be. I think it's a public relations front.
Right. Yeah.
Blue Book never handled the real good stuff. And everybody knew that, except the common folk out there, who were diddled regularly and never told the truth about anything. But the big secret seems to have been for so long is why are we keeping classified the enormous facilities on the moon? And they're not ours.
Whose are they?
Well, that's a good question. I can tell you flatly who they are.
Okay.
You familiar with the term Anunnaki?
Absolutely.
All right, well, you really have to understand Zecharia Sitchin's work to really grasp where we stand today in relationship with this group of intelligences, and I'm not speaking of one, there are several. The last I heard, there were 4 different groups we were relating with. The Anunnaki are one, and there are others.
Okay, this is very interesting. Can you describe the Anunnaki that first of all, have you had exposure to them face to face?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes, I've met some face to face.
Okay.
Now, whether they were the Anunnaki, I don't know.
Okay, well...
The ones I've run face to face were typically human.
Typically human.
I mean, they could put on a suit, tie, a dress, blue jeans, T-shirt,
Okay.
walk in our midst, and you would never know.
And they weren't 9 feet tall or higher?
No, the ones I've met and the ones I've seen aboard the ships are not that big at all. They're just like us.
Uh-huh.
So we're dealing with 4 different groups that I've concluded, my own personal view.
Okay.
Yeah, you might talk to Jim Sparks and he might tell you there are 8 or 10 or a dozen more. You know, I don't know. I can only tell you what little bit I've learned over the years. There are 4 different groups that I've encountered, and they're all humanoid. One group is completely human. And not all of the Anunnaki are 9 feet tall. They were human enough that we are related to them and they're related to us. And that lovely little story in chapter 6 of Genesis is quite true. They did indeed engineer the genes and chromosomes of an existing species on this planet. God knows how long ago. Sitchin says it was 200,000 years. The information I have learned indicates that one of the major tweaking took place about 60,000 years ago. That Homo sapiens sapiens was tweaked and genetically manipulated even more. So we're coming along slowly.
Okay, so what 4 races? Let's name them, in your opinion.
Well, there are the humans.
Okay.
Some people call them the Nordics. Then you have guys that are very pale and very tall and very broad, which some people refer to as the big whites.
Okay.
And then you have the little guys.
The grays, and then the Anunnaki. So those are the four you're familiar with.
And not all of the grays are an evolved species. Some of them appear to be what they used to use. They were an artificial life form.
Androids.
Yeah, they were humanoid androids, but they were constructed. They're laboratory products. And they often wondered why, in cases of crashes, where there were survivors, that some of them didn't come back and try to retrieve. And the story that came out among the military for many years was that they wrote them off. They went back and made more. Now there are some. When I learned what I learned in 1963, 64, 65, it changed my life. It changed my way of thinking, and I became obsessed with what I had learned. And over the years, I've learned so much more. And as I may have mentioned to you earlier, I learned a little bit. I wanted more. You know, talk about an addiction. When you start learning some things about a subject that is so profound, the more I learned, the more I wanted to know. And the more I wanted to know, the more I learned. And the more I learned, the more obsessed I became. And you talk about losing a paradigm. My old paradigm literally crumbled around my knees. You know, the world that I thought I lived in, I learned was not the world that I lived in. And the reality that I looked around and thought I saw was not the reality that exists. That much of what we see is an illusion. It's a result of our own illusions. We humans sometimes, rather than face reality, we create a little world of our own. You know, we get up and go to work, we raise the kids, we buy a house, buy a car, take a vacation, go on about our lives, try to save money, put a little in the bank for the kids' college, and live a normal life. And then I learned that there's no such thing as a normal life. That the world that exists is not at all what we think it is. And the more I learned, as I said, my old paradigm crashed around my knees, and some of our remote viewers have concluded that yes, it's going to happen this time. That we and it will be on the same side of the sun at the same time. And if the remote viewer, and they're getting their information from ETs, from sources within the US government that tell me that yes, they are deeply concerned about it, and they're worried sick about it, and they don't know what to do about it. What could the government or anyone else tell you? What could they say to you? Would they tell you that grab your hat, dig a hole, hang on? He says, oh, it seems to be a rather nice planet, and we know about it, and all we need to do is name it. And then bless his heart, you know, he'd never had a heart problem, but within a year he was dead with a heart attack. Incredible race of humans, does have a future. And it is in the stars. And we are going out there to reclaim our rightful place. It's kind of amusing considering that the last time we met, I told you it was to be my last interview. And here I am again. And, you know, how can I explain that?
We have gotten the most incredible response to your interview. I have to say, it's actually been the most popular of all of our interviews.
Well,
and
nice
I
to
think
hear.
there's a reason for that.
Well, thank you.
I think that in many ways you put yourself on the line, and you actually embody the curiosity that was like rampant in all of us. And you did it at a time when, and in the military no less, and you broke rules and you kind of stuck it out, and you're just, I don't know, a one-man disclosure project as far as I'm concerned.
Well, thank you, Carrie. That's very kind of you to say that. But let me explain something. I was a normal human being for a big portion of my life. You know, I was a career military and no-nonsense kind. I wore a crew cut,